She thought a millionaire was the waiter. But that mistake became her best decision ever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The restaurant glowed like a jewelry box under the warm New York lights. Conversations hummed like soft jazz, and silverware clicked gently on porcelain plates. Every table sparkled, each dish plated like art under golden light. But near the glass wall, a young woman stood frozen, clutching a delivery tray to her chest. Her name was Ella Brooks. She was 24, a part-time barista and evening waitress who had just finished a 12-hour shift. Her apron still smelled faintly of espresso, and the soles of her sneakers were worn thin. Through the reflection on the window, she saw herself a second-hand dress, hair tied hastily, a girl who did not belong in this elegant place. "Come on, Ella," she whispered to herself. "You promised Mia you would deliver it." She took a deep breath, pushed open the polished glass door, and stepped into the hum of laughter and perfume. Her eyes scanned the tables. "Table 7, she murmured under her breath. "That is the last order tonight." At the far end of the dining room, a man stood beside a table, sleeves rolled up, adjusting glasses and placing a wine bottle upright. He looked too young and calm to be one of the wealthy clients who usually dined there. His white shirt sleeves were rolled, and his dark hair caught the light. Ella exhaled in relief. Finally, a waiter who looked approachable. "Excuse me," she said with a nervous smile. "Can you please take this dessert to table 5? I am running late for the closing shift." The man blinked, surprised, and for a moment she saw confusion flicker in his blue-gray eyes. Then he smiled faintly and said, "Of course." She thanked him quickly, unaware that every nearby table had turned to look. As he walked away, balancing the dessert plate with a grace that seemed too natural, she let out a long sigh. "You did it, Ella. One more day survived." She turned to leave, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, but then froze when he called after her. "Wait, you dropped this." He held up a small linen handkerchief with watercolor brushstrokes on one corner and a faint handwritten line, asterisk, "For dreamers who work late." Asterisk. She flushed bright red, reaching for it. "Oh, that is mine. Thank you. It is just something I painted when I was bored." He studied it for a second, his expression softening. "It is beautiful." "You made this?" "Yeah, but it is nothing," she said quickly. "Just doodles." He folded the handkerchief carefully, slipping it into his pocket. "I will keep it safe." "You really do not have to," she stammered. "It will probably get stained." "Then I guess I will just have to be careful," he said, smiling again before walking toward the kitchen. She watched him disappear through the swinging doors, her heart strangely unsteady. There was something about his calmness, the quiet authority in the way he moved, that felt different. But she shook her head. "Get a grip, Ella. He is just a waiter, and you are just tired." Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady against the glass. She walked out into the drizzle, not knowing that the man she had mistaken for a server was Adrian Cole, the owner of the entire restaurant and the billionaire founder of Cole Ventures, and that her tiny mistake tonight would soon become the most extraordinary turn of her life. She thought a millionaire was the waiter, but that mistake became her best decision ever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The restaurant glowed like a jewelry box under the warm New York lights. Conversations hummed like soft jazz, and silverware clicked gently on porcelain plates. Every table sparkled, each dish plated like art under golden light. But near the glass wall, a young woman stood frozen, clutching a delivery tray to her chest. Her name was Ella Brooks. She was 24, a part-time barista and evening waitress who had just finished a 12-hour shift. Her apron still smelled faintly of espresso, and the soles of her sneakers were worn thin. Through the reflection on the window, she saw herself a second-hand dress, hair tied hastily, a girl who did not belong in this elegant place. "Come on, Ella," she whispered to herself. "You promised Mia you would deliver it." She took a deep breath, pushed open the polished glass door, and stepped into the hum of laughter and perfume. Her eyes scanned the tables. "Table 7, she murmured under her breath. "That is the last order tonight." At the far end of the dining room, a man stood beside a table, sleeves rolled up, adjusting glasses and placing a wine bottle upright. He looked too young and calm to be one of the wealthy clients who usually dined there. His white shirt sleeves were rolled, and his dark hair caught the light. Ella exhaled in relief. Finally, a waiter who looked approachable. "Excuse me," she said with a nervous smile. "Can you please take this dessert to table 5? I am running late for the closing shift." The man blinked, surprised, and for a moment she saw confusion flicker in his blue-gray eyes. Then he smiled faintly and said, "Of course." She thanked him quickly, unaware that every nearby table had turned to look. As he walked away, balancing the dessert plate with a grace that seemed too natural, she let out a long sigh. "You did it, Ella. One more day survived." She turned to leave, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, but then froze when he called after her. "Wait, you dropped this." He held up a small linen handkerchief with watercolor brushstrokes on one corner and a faint handwritten line, asterisk. "For dreamers who work late, asterisk." She flushed bright red, reaching for it. "Oh, that is mine, thank you. It is just something I painted when I was bored." He studied it for a second, his expression softening. "It is beautiful. You made this?" "Yeah, but it is nothing," she said quickly. "Just doodles." He folded the handkerchief carefully, slipping it into his pocket. "I will keep it safe." "You really do not have to," she stammered. "It will probably get stained." "Then I guess I will just have to be careful," he said, smiling again before walking toward the kitchen. She watched him disappear through the swinging doors, her heart strangely unsteady. There was something about his calmness, the quiet authority in the way he moved, that felt different. But she shook her head. "Get a grip, Ella. He is just a waiter, and you are just tired." Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady against the glass. She walked out into the drizzle, not knowing that the man she had mistaken for a server was Adrian Cole, the owner of the entire restaurant and the billionaire founder of Cole Ventures, and that her tiny mistake tonight would soon become the most extraordinary turn of her life. That night, the rain followed Ella home, turning the city streets into glimmering rivers of light. She rode the late bus back to her tiny apartment on the edge of Brooklyn, her head resting against the window. The reflection that stared back at her was tired but proud. She had delivered the dessert, survived the day, and maybe even made a small friend at that fancy restaurant. Still, a part of her could not stop replaying the stranger's calm smile and the way he said, "I will keep it safe." In her cluttered studio apartment, the heater groaned like an old man. She hung her damp jacket, slipped off her shoes, and collapsed on the couch. Bills littered the coffee table. Rent due, utility overdue. Her mother's hospital statement, still unpaid. Ella rubbed her eyes, whispering, "One day, Mom, I will make it easier, I promise." Her sketchbook lay beside her, filled with drawings of cups, faces, and soft city lights. On the last page, she had scribbled her dream. Coffee and canvas, a small place where stories and art meet. She smiled faintly, then fell asleep with the city hum as her lullaby. The next morning, the alarm clock buzzed at 6:45. She rushed to her morning job at a downtown cafe, hair in a messy bun, apron tied too tightly. The smell of roasted beans and steamed milk wrapped around her like comfort. Her coworker, Mia, grinned. "So, did the delivery make it?" Ella poured coffee into a paper cup and sighed. "Barely. I almost messed up again. I handed the dessert to the wrong person." "Again?" Mia laughed. "You have a gift, girl. Who was it this time?" "Some waiter, I guess. He was weirdly calm about it." Mia leaned in, teasing. "Was he cute?" Ella rolled her eyes, but her cheeks betrayed her. "Maybe a little. Anyway, he was nice." "Then it is a win," Mia said, handing her a tray. "Nice guys are rare in that world." Ella shrugged, pretending to brush it off, but inside, she felt that strange flutter again. The day went on in its usual blur orders, spills, laughter, exhaustion, but late in the afternoon, a news alert flashed on the cafe's TV. The headline read, "Adrian Cole announces new art scholarship for young creatives." The photo showed him in a sharp navy suit, shaking hands at a press conference. Ella froze, the cup midair. Her breath caught. That face, that smile, the same eyes that had looked at her across the restaurant. Her hand trembled, and a few drops of coffee splashed on the counter. Mia noticed. "What is wrong?" "Nothing," Ella said quickly, heart racing. "Just, he looks familiar." But as the customers came and went, she could not stop thinking about it. Could it really be him? The man she had mistaken for a waiter? The billionaire investor who owned that entire restaurant chain? She laughed under her breath. No way. People like him do not clean wine glasses. Yet when the afternoon crowd slowed, she found herself scrolling through articles, each headline more unbelievable than the last. Adrian Cole, 32, founder of Cole Ventures, a self-made millionaire, known for his quiet philanthropy and aversion to publicity. Ella whispered, quiet, just like that night. The bell above the cafe door jingled. She looked up and nearly dropped her phone. Adrian Cole himself walked in, without bodyguards, without the tailored armor of his usual world. Just jeans, a gray sweater, and the same calm eyes. Good afternoon, he said, his voice smooth but kind. 2 cappuccinos to go, please. Ella blinked, words tangling in her throat. Yes, of course. As she fumbled with the cups, he smiled lightly. You work here too? Yes, she said, still stunned. Morning shift and sometimes evenings. He nodded. Hard-working. I like that. The machine hissed as she tried to focus on the milk foam. About the other night, he said softly. I never got to thank you. Thank me? She stammered. For what? I made you carry dessert like an idiot. He chuckled, low and genuine. It was the most human moment I have had in months. Her face warmed. Most people would be mad. Then most people forget how to enjoy being ordinary, he said. He took the coffees, handed her one, and added, For you. I think you could use a break. Before she could protest, he paid, nodded, and walked out into the late afternoon light. Ella stood frozen, heart hammering, her fingers wrapped around the warm cup. Outside, Adrian turned back once, catching her gaze through the glass. For a brief second, their worlds overlapped again, the billionaire and the waitress, connected by one beautiful mistake. The next few days passed in a blur, but that one afternoon kept replaying in Ella's mind like a song stuck on repeat. She could still hear his calm voice, the warmth in his tone, the way he looked at her like she was not invisible. That night, she stayed up sketching at her small kitchen table, the lamp buzzing softly overhead. Her sketchbook was open to a new page, one titled Dream Cafe Layout. She drew tables, a corner art wall, and shelves filled with secondhand books. At the top, she doodled a tiny handkerchief marked, For Dreamers Who Work Late. It was her quiet reminder of the stranger who somehow saw her that night. But she shook her head and laughed softly. You are getting carried away, Ella. He is a billionaire. You are just a barista. The next morning, she headed to the cafe as usual, pushing the door open just as the sun painted gold across the counter. But her manager intercepted her with a grin. Ella, good news. You are getting promoted to head barista for the downtown corporate event next week. Some big investment company booked the space. Ella blinked. Really? Who? Cole Ventures, he said. The one owned by that Adrian Cole guy. Big deal, huh? Her heart skipped. Yeah, big deal. She tried to sound casual, but her hands were trembling. The following week, the cafe was transformed into a sleek private venue. Elegant lighting, white flowers, and trays of espresso lined up like soldiers. Ella adjusted her apron, nerves buzzing as guests began to arrive. The air was filled with soft jazz and murmured conversations. Then the door opened, and he walked in. Adrian. No suit this time, just a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled, same calm confidence. Their eyes met, and time seemed to slow. Miss Brooks, he greeted, a small smile tugging at his lips. Looks like we meet again. Apparently so, she said, trying not to drop the tray. You really like coffee. Or maybe I like the person who makes it, he replied lightly, his tone playful but sincere. Her breath caught, but before she could reply, someone called his name from across the room. A tall woman in a designer dress joined him, speaking quickly about schedules and investors. Adrian nodded politely, but his gaze kept drifting back to Ella. The evening went smoothly until a sudden accident. One of the guests, distracted by a phone call, bumped into a tray of cappuccinos, spilling coffee across the white tablecloth. Ella rushed over with towels, heart racing. I am so sorry, sir. But the man scowled. Do you even know what you are doing? Get the manager. Before she could answer, Adrian stepped in. That will not be necessary. His voice was steady, cool. She handled it just fine. The man looked startled. And who exactly are you to decide that? Adrian's calm smile returned. I am the one paying for this event. The room went silent. The guest's face drained of color as whispers spread through the crowd. Ella froze, realizing that this was the first time she had seen him step fully into his power. Adrian turned to her gently. You okay? She nodded, speechless. Good. Then let us finish this night strong. After the event, as the guests filtered out, he approached her quietly. Sorry for the scene earlier. People sometimes forget their manners. You did not have to defend me, she said softly. I am used to being invisible. Maybe that is the problem, he said. Too many people get used to it. He looked at her sketchbook sitting near the counter, a few pages sticking out. You draw? She hesitated. Just ideas, silly ones. He opened it gently, his eyes scanning the pages. Coffee and canvas, he read aloud. That is not silly, that is vision. It is a dream, she said, and dreams do not pay rent. He looked up, meeting her gaze. Sometimes they do, if you believe in them enough. She laughed softly. You make it sound easy. It is not easy, he admitted, but it is possible. He closed the sketchbook, handed it back, and added quietly, Let me show you something tomorrow. Same time? Her heart pounded. Show me what? You will see, he said, with that same calm smile. The next afternoon, a black sedan waited outside the cafe. Ella hesitated before stepping in. Adrian greeted her with coffee in hand. Relax, he said. No meetings, no suits, just a walk. He drove her through the city until they stopped in front of an old brick building with a faded sign that read, The Artisan's Loft. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows onto canvases, pottery wheels, and murals in progress. This, he said, is one of the art spaces my foundation sponsors. Local artists, baristas, teachers, anyone with passion. I think your dream belongs here too. Ella's voice shook. Why are you showing me this? Because I believe in second chances, he said, and in people who work late for what they love. She looked around the studio, her eyes stinging with emotion. For the first time, her dream did not feel so far away. And for the first time, she wondered if her mistake that night was actually fate. The following weeks became a quiet blur of early mornings and late nights. Every Thursday, Ella met Adrian at the Artisan's Loft, where he insisted on showing her how to turn her coffee shop sketches into something real. At first, she thought he was just being polite, maybe feeling sorry for her. But the way he listened, the way he looked at her art with genuine interest, told another story. He asked questions, took notes, even rolled up his sleeves to help her paint the test wall. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the studio, Adrian glanced at her sketchbook again. You really drew all of these? He asked. Every line? Every one, she said with a shy laugh. I cannot afford mistakes on paper, at least. You would be surprised, he replied. Some mistakes turn into masterpieces. She smiled, feeling warmth rise in her chest. Their rhythm became something familiar: coffee in the morning, creativity in the afternoon, and quiet laughter in between. He was patient, grounded, and nothing like the image of the cold, distant millionaire she had once imagined. One day, as they walked along the river after a long workshop session, Adrian suddenly said, I never thanked you properly for that night. Ella tilted her head. You mean the night I made you carry dessert? He chuckled. Yes, that one. You have no idea how rare it is for someone to talk to me without expecting anything. You are welcome, she said lightly. I did not expect you to be anyone at all. He stopped walking, hands in his pockets. That is exactly why I keep coming back. His words lingered in the cool air between them, and for the first time she did not know what to say. That night Ella could not sleep. She kept thinking about how easily he had crossed the line between boss and friend, between mentor and something deeper. And though she knew the world they came from was miles apart, her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, they were walking the same path now. The next morning, she arrived early at the cafe, humming softly as she prepped the counter. But the peace shattered when her coworker Mia came running, waving a glossy magazine. Ella, look at this, the headline screamed. Adrian Cole spotted with mystery woman's secret muse or scandal? The photo showed them laughing outside the Artisan's Loft, her sketchbook in hand. Ella's stomach dropped. Oh no. Is that you? Mia asked. Ella, this is everywhere. People online are saying you are his girlfriend. Panic rose like a tide. By the time Ella checked her phone, the comments were pouring in, strangers dissecting her clothes, her background, her worth. Some cruel, some envious. One comment burned brightest. She is clearly using him. Her hands shook as she scrolled, the screen blurring through tears. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Adrian stepped in, looking serious but calm. Ella, he began. I am so sorry. I just saw it too. Why is this happening? She whispered. I did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong, he said firmly. The media twists anything they can. It will pass. Easy for you to say, she said, her voice cracking. You will still be the successful CEO. I will just be the girl who looks like she slept her way into a headline. The pain in her voice cut through him. Ella, listen. No, she said, backing away. I cannot do this. I did not ask for any of this. She tore off her apron, grabbed her coat, and ran out into the rain. Adrian followed, calling her name, but she disappeared into the crowd. That night, she sat alone in her apartment. Lights off, rain tapping at the window. Her phone buzzed non-stop, but she could not bring herself to answer. She thought of her mother, her dream, everything she had worked for, and how easily it could be taken away by one photograph. Meanwhile, across town, Adrian sat in his office, staring at the same article, anger simmering beneath his calm. He had built an empire on control. Yet this protecting someone who mattered felt completely out of his hands. He opened the drawer of his desk and pulled out the small handkerchief she had once given him. The painted words glimmered faintly under the desk light. For dreamers who work late. He whispered to himself, Hold on, Ella. I am not letting this end like this. Somewhere between the rain and the silence, both of them knew this story was not over. It was only the beginning of something that neither fame nor fortune could ever script. The next morning, Ella woke to the sound of her phone vibrating endlessly. The light from the screen flashed against the pale walls of her apartment, her name trending beside his on every platform. She groaned, pressing the pillow over her face. This cannot be happening, she whispered. But it was. The story had spread faster than wildfire. By noon, reporters stood outside the cafe where she worked, and curious strangers crowded the sidewalk, hoping to catch a glimpse of the so-called mystery woman. Ella felt trapped in her own life. She could not go to work, she could not walk the streets without stares, and her landlord was already hinting that too much attention would be bad for the building. When her phone buzzed again, it was a call from an unknown number. Ella, it is me, Adrian said, his voice firm but kind. I can help. Please, meet me. No, she said, exhaustion breaking through. You have done enough. At least let me explain, he pleaded. There was something in his tone that made her pause. Against her better judgment, she agreed to meet him that evening at the empty artisan's loft. When she arrived, the sun was setting, spilling gold light across the studio walls. Adrian stood near the window, phone in hand, looking more human than she had ever seen him. You should not have come, she said quietly. You are only going to make this worse. I am not here to hide, he replied. I am here to make things right. He handed her a folder. Inside were documents, proof that his foundation had been preparing a grant for her cafe project long before the rumors began. You earned this, Ella. I wanted to surprise you when the paperwork was ready, but now people think I was trying to buy you. Her eyes filled with tears. Why would you even do this? Why me? He looked at her steadily. Because you remind me of the person I used to be. Someone who worked for everything and expected nothing. Someone who still believes kindness means something. Ella felt her throat tighten. Adrian, people like us do not mix. The world will never see it that way. He took a step closer. Then let them talk. I do not care what they see. I care about what is real. The air between them was heavy, fragile. For a moment neither spoke. The only sound was the hum of the city beyond the window. I cannot promise the noise will stop, he said softly, but I can promise you will never face it alone. His words lingered like a chord that refused to fade. She looked down at the folder again, tracing the edges with trembling fingers. You really believe I can do this? Build something of my own? I do, he said simply, and I want to help not as your investor, but as someone who believes in you. For the first time in days, she smiled. It was small, uncertain, but real. Okay, she whispered, then let us start again. Over the next weeks, Adrian made good on his promise. Together, they worked quietly, away from the cameras, to design the first draft of her cafe and art studio. He taught her how to pitch her ideas, how to manage finances, and how to believe her dream was more than just a fantasy scribbled in a sketchbook. Every time she doubted herself, he reminded her of that handkerchief, of how something small and handmade could carry meaning far beyond its worth. Late one evening, after a long day of planning, they sat side by side at a small table covered in papers and coffee cups. Ella leaned back, exhausted but content. Do you ever get tired of being the man everyone expects you to be? She asked. Adrian smiled faintly. All the time. But tonight, I feel like myself again. She studied him quietly, realizing that beneath the wealth and headlines, he was still just a man trying to find something genuine in a world that worshipped power. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not giving up on me. You gave me something to hold on to too," he said. "A reason to remember why I started all of this." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was peaceful, shared, and full of something unnamed. Outside, the city lights shimmered like falling stars, and Ella thought to herself that maybe, just maybe, this mistake was turning into something far greater than either of them had ever planned. And for the first time, she felt hope again, not borrowed from someone else's fortune, but built from her own heart. Weeks passed, and life began to feel almost normal again. The rumors faded like dust in the wind, replaced by new headlines that no longer had her name. Ella spent most days at the artisan's loft, surrounded by sketches, coffee beans, and paint-stained fingertips. Adrian came by often, though he no longer arrived in tailored suits or with assistants. He came as himself, quiet, focused, sleeves rolled up, always carrying 2 cups of coffee. Together, they built something tangible. The sign over the doorway read, "For dreamers who work late." The phrase from her handkerchief that had somehow become their shared anthem. One late afternoon, Ella stood on a ladder painting the final strokes on the wall mural, a blend of city lights, coffee steam, and blooming flowers. Adrian watched from below, smiling. "You are going to make this place unforgettable," he said. "No," she replied, climbing down with a smudge of blue paint on her cheek. "We are." He laughed softly, reaching out to wipe the paint but hesitated midair. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, everything around them disappeared: the noise, the past, the differences. But before he could speak, the door burst open. A woman in a sharp black suit walked in, heels echoing on the wooden floor. "Mr. Cole," she said curtly, "the board meeting is in 20 minutes, and investors are asking why you have ignored 3 calls." Ella stepped back instinctively. Adrian's demeanor shifted, his warmth replaced by that calm, authoritative mask she had seen on TV. "Tell them I will join shortly," he said. The woman frowned, eyeing Ella with disdain. "And this is?" "A friend," he replied evenly. "Someone who reminds me why I started this company." The woman's lips tightened. "The shareholders will not appreciate their CEO spending so much time painting walls." The sting of her tone was unmistakable. Ella looked away, pretending to rearrange brushes, but her chest ached. As soon as the woman left, Adrian exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I am sorry you had to hear that." "You do not owe me an apology," Ella said softly. "You have a whole world waiting on you. I just have this little corner." "This corner matters," he said firmly. "It matters more than the noise out there." But that night, as she lay in bed, her thoughts were tangled. Could 2 people from such different worlds really stay connected when the rest of the world would always see her as the mistake? The next morning, she avoided his calls. She poured her energy into finishing the cafe, telling herself it was enough to see it thrive. By the time the grand opening day arrived, the small space was transformed: warm lights, soft music, art on every wall. The line outside stretched down the block, yet even with the excitement, her heart felt heavy. He had not shown up. As the evening crowd filled the room, a journalist approached her. "Miss Brooks, this is incredible," she said. "How does it feel to open your dream cafe with the help of Adrian Cole?" Ella smiled politely. "It feels like the dream was always here. I just needed to believe in it." The reporter nodded, jotting notes. "Is he coming tonight?" "I do not think so," Ella said quietly. But just as she turned to refill a customer's cup, a familiar voice answered from behind her. "I would not miss it for the world." She turned. Adrian stood in the doorway, no tie, no entourage, just holding a small frame in his hands. The room fell silent as he walked toward her. "You left this behind?" he said, handing her the framed handkerchief, the same one she had given him months ago, now pressed behind glass. "I thought it belonged here." The sight of it made her eyes sting. "You kept it all this time?" "It reminded me of you," he said softly, "of everything real." The crowd began to clap, the sound swelling around them. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped judging and started seeing. Later that night, when the last guest left, Ella and Adrian sat at the counter, the city glowing through the windows. "You did it," he said. "You turned a mistake into something beautiful." "No," she replied, smiling. "We did." He lifted his cup toward her in a quiet toast. "To mistakes worth making." She laughed, tears glimmering in her eyes. And under the golden light of her cafe, two dreamers who had started from different worlds finally found home in the same one. For weeks after the grand opening, Ella's cafe became a quiet sensation. People came not only for the coffee or the art, but for the feeling of belonging that filled the space. Adrian visited often, sometimes in the mornings before meetings, sometimes late at night when the lights were dim and only a few candles flickered on the tables. Their bond deepened in those unspoken hours, laughter spilling easily between them, their conversations stretching far beyond business or art. But success, like every light, drew its shadows. One afternoon, as Ella was serving a customer, the same woman from the board Adrian's executive advisor walked in. Her tone was polite but sharp. "Miss Brooks," she said, "Mr. Cole has been missing board sessions, declining projects. I hope you understand how that looks." Ella's chest tightened. "He is free to make his own choices," she replied quietly. "Of course," the woman said coolly, "but choices have consequences, especially for people who depend on him." That night Adrian arrived at the cafe as usual, smiling, but Ella could not shake the conversation. When he asked what was wrong, she hesitated before saying, "I do not want to be the reason you lose what you built." He frowned. "You are not the reason. You are the reminder of why I built it in the first place." "Still," she whispered, "the world will not see it that way." Silence filled the space between them, heavy and unkind. "Ella," he said softly, "do you trust me?" "I do," she said. "Then trust that I know what matters." She nodded, but deep down fear lingered. The next morning, the headlines returned, worse than before. Cole's new obsession CEO neglects company for barista girlfriend. The media painted her as the distraction that brought down a giant. The cafe doorbell rang non-stop with cameras flashing outside. Ella tried to ignore them, but inside she was breaking. By evening, she locked herself in the storage room, tears streaming down her face. When Adrian finally reached her, she refused to open the door. "Go away," she said through the wood. "You should not be here." "I am not leaving," he said firmly. "Let them say what they want. I know the truth." "You cannot fix this," she cried. "Every time you try, it just gets worse." The pain in her voice cut him, but he stayed, leaning against the door, his voice steady. "Then let it be worse for now. Sometimes the right thing costs us everything first." After a long silence, the door opened slowly. She stood there, eyes red, but defiant. "I cannot keep being your headline, Adrian. Not like this." "You are not my headline," he said. "You are my heart." His words hung in the air, raw and real, but she shook her head, stepping back. "Then maybe your heart needs to remember who you are before it forgets everything else." And before he could stop her, she walked away, the cafe lights flickering behind her like fading stars. Outside, the city roared, indifferent to two people trying to hold on to something fragile. That night, for the first time since they met, Adrian and Ella went their separate ways, each carrying the weight of love that refused to fit into the world that kept tearing them apart. Weeks turned into months, and the space between them grew wider than either wanted to admit. Ella poured everything she had into the cafe, expanding the art classes, hosting small exhibitions, and helping local artists sell their work. On the surface, she seemed fine, but at night, when the shop was empty and the lights were low, she caught herself glancing at the door, half expecting him to walk in again. Adrian, meanwhile, buried himself in work. The board had threatened to remove him as CEO if he did not restore focus. So he returned to his office towers, the endless meetings, the sharp suits, and the cold, quiet success. Yet none of it felt like victory. His penthouse felt like a museum of everything he had once believed mattered. And yet all he could think about was a tiny cafe with warm lights and the smell of roasted coffee. One late night, as he sat alone in his office, he saw the handkerchief again, still framed on the wall. The words beneath the glass glimmered faintly. "For dreamers who work late." He smiled bitterly. "That was us," he whispered. The next morning, his secretary informed him about an upcoming charity gala to celebrate community entrepreneurs, one of which was Ella Brooks. His heart clenched. He had donated quietly through his foundation months ago, ensuring her cafe could keep growing, but he had stayed out of sight until now. "Confirm my attendance," he said. The night of the gala arrived with soft music and polished marble floors. The crowd sparkled with gowns and diamonds, but all Adrian saw was her standing near the exhibit wall, radiant yet simple in a pale blue dress. She was talking to a group of young artists, her laughter genuine and warm. He stood still, taking in the sight of her before finally walking over. "You still steal every room you walk into," he said softly. Ella turned, startled, then composed herself. "Adrian, I did not expect to see you here." "I was invited," he replied gently. "Technically, it is my foundation's event." She nodded, unsure what to say. There was so much between them, and yet the air felt strangely calm. "The cafe looks beautiful," he continued. "You did it." "We did," she corrected, meeting his eyes for the first time in months. He smiled faintly. "I missed that." For a moment, the world around them faded, the noise, the whispers, the flashing cameras. "I never wanted to be your distraction," she said. "I just wanted to build something that mattered." "You were never a distraction," he said firmly. "You were the reason I remembered what mattered." She looked away, tears threatening. "Then why did we fall apart?" He took a breath. "Because I thought protecting you meant stepping back. But all it did was make me lose the only real thing I had." The host's voice interrupted, announcing her name. "Ella Brooks, founder of For Dreamers Cafe, recipient of this year's Community Vision Award." The crowd applauded, but she stood frozen, overwhelmed. Adrian whispered, "Go on, this is your moment." As she walked toward the stage, her hands trembled, and the applause echoed like thunder. From the audience, Adrian watched with pride and regret in equal measure. Her speech was short but heartfelt. "This cafe began as a sketch in a notebook. It became real because someone believed in me when I did not believe in myself. So tonight, I dedicate this to every dreamer who works late." Her eyes found his across the room. "And to the one who reminded me that kindness can change everything." When the crowd erupted again, Adrian knew this was not the end. It was the moment before something began again. After the gala, the city felt different, softer, quieter, as if the world had taken a breath. Ella's cafe grew into a symbol of resilience, and yet something in her heart still waited for closure. A few days later, as the evening light filtered through the cafe windows, she locked up early, unaware that Adrian stood outside watching through the glass. He waited until she turned off the last lamp before stepping forward, his reflection merging with hers on the window pane. When she looked up, surprise flickered in her eyes, followed by a warmth she could not hide. He opened the door slowly. "I was not sure if I should come," he said, "but there are some things I cannot leave unsaid." She smiled faintly. "You always did find me when I was closing up." He chuckled softly. "You make it hard to stay away." The quiet between them was gentle now, not heavy like before. Adrian looked around the cafe, the framed handkerchief on the wall, the art, the smell of coffee. "You turned this place into something extraordinary," he said. "It was never just about coffee. It is about people, about hope." "You helped me believe it was possible," she said. "And you helped me remember why I started all this in the first place." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. "This is not a grand gesture," he said. "No boardrooms, no reporters, no contracts, just this." He opened it, revealing a simple silver ring engraved with 5 words. "For dreamers who work late." Ella's breath caught. "Adrian, I am not asking for perfection," he said softly. "I am asking for another chance, to build something real with you, no matter how messy it gets." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, her heart overflowing with every memory, the rain, the mistaken smile, the laughter, the heartbreak, and the lessons in between. "You know," she whispered, "if someone told me months ago that the man I mistook for a waiter would be standing here right now, I would have laughed." He smiled, stepping closer. "Then maybe laughter was where it all began." She took the ring, her fingers trembling. "You already gave me the world, Adrian. You gave me faith in myself." "Then let me give you one more thing," he said. "A promise that I will never let go again." Ella nodded, tears spilling freely now. "Then yes," she said softly. "Let us try again." Outside, snow began to fall, soft and slow, catching the glow of the streetlights. Inside, the cafe was warm, filled with the hum of quiet music and the smell of fresh espresso. Adrian slipped the ring on her finger, and for a moment, everything stopped: the noise, the chaos, the years of pretending to be someone else. "You know what this place means to me?" he asked. "It means we made something out of a mistake." Ella laughed through her tears. "The best mistake we ever made." He leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers. "To us," he whispered. "To dreamers who work late." The camera of life pulled back, leaving 2 silhouettes framed by golden light, standing in the cafe that started from one wrong table and ended with love that was finally right.